Hello to everyone who is joining us along the way. We are super happy with Becca to present you this new feature, the Competency Framework, which we are sure will allow you finally to get the best out of your competency models. Our goal today will be to explain why we choose to develop this tool, how it will look like, and what impact it will allow you to have in your HR decisions. To quickly, introduce myself, I'm Emeric, Head of Science at Assessors, and I'm delighted to do this webinar with Becca. So Becca, I let you introduce yourself and take the hand. Just
Certainly. Now,
switching
can you
on your
see
screen. Yeah.
my screen? Brilliant. Good morning, everybody. As Emeric mentioned, my name is Becca, Head of Sales UK here at Assess First. As we mentioned, we're going to talk through our new competency framework feature on our app here at Assess First. One topic that we're seeing appearing more and more actually within the HR world at the moment, often due to COVID, but we're seeing that there's a bigger push on workforce planning and really understanding and analysing what your existing teams have to offer and using this information to forecast and plan workforce supply and demand, and ultimately to ensure that the right people with the right skills and potential are in the right place at the right time. We know that for those companies larger than 2,000 in numbers, 100% of them have set up workforce planning. So it's already a systematic implementation. And even for those smaller businesses, at least 52% have created a process around workforce planning. So it's already in action. It's already a focus in the majority of businesses. Now, the development of a competency framework is the start of this journey to understand what underpins your teams. That's a general approach, but a competency framework is going to be most efficient if it's really defined and broken down on a role by role basis, and that each role within your business, their crucial competencies to achieve success are individually defined. And so, with an effective approach, a competency framework can have loads of benefits throughout the entirety of a business, not necessarily just HR and that specific sector, but in theory, any element of the business that requires performance improvement and optimization. The first of those benefits, really, a competency framework can optimize your recruitment of candidates. We see that candidates are assessed on more consistent elements, more fair, and therefore certainly more efficiently. Not only that, but you can also look at developing the skills of employees a lot easier through using a competency framework, quite simply because the training strategy is better defined. Therefore, you can really look at understanding and identifying areas for development in each of your team members. Thirdly, we can identify more easily those with high potential among your employees, really allowing you to understand what it is that your employees can add to the business and really delve into where they can possibly move across the business into a different role or potentially be promoted within your business today. Facilitating the internal mobility of employees becomes a lot easier as well, because you're able to build more appropriate development paths for those who obviously wish to move around your existing business. And you can strengthen the process of individual performance reviews, quite simply because that performance evaluation is based on objective criteria. You've set out through your competency framework what is crucial to success and what essentially you're looking for. Emeric, over to you.
Yeah. Oh. So every benefits Becca just presented to you is what you can expect in a, let's say, in a perfect world, a world where you can get the full potential out of your competency models, a world where you benefit from each of your investments in workforce planning. Unfortunately, this ideal world is probably not your world today, because the reality, and undoubtedly your reality, is much darker, much harder. So why? First, because a competency model takes a monster time to build, sometimes several years. Also, building a competency framework model is extremely expensive. We have study which is maybe not the most recent, but which show that construction alone can cost a lot, especially in the context where the competency model is built with external support from, for example, a consulting company. So you might say to me, yes, but it's a necessary investment. Maybe, but when we look at the actual use of competency model in business, we realize that your time and your money are far from being profitable. Because even if your competency model required a considerable amount of work and a huge investment, most of the time it's underused or even abandoned altogether. This is what emerges from a study carried out by Demos, a French consulting firm, a few years ago when they surveyed 200 and a half companies. And the conclusion is that only 4% of companies have made the process and their competency framework really operational. So therefore, the question to be asked is why competency models, all claimed by all and the result of significant work, are so poorly used. And to understand this, we spoke with some of our clients, which enable us to identify 5 problems preventing the effective operationalization of the competency model. First problem being that the models are too complicated to be used by operational staff, such as manager or, for example, by HR. In general, when we talk about a competency model, we are talking about, let's say, an Excel document that is a bit unreadable, with tabs everywhere, formulas in all directions, and where the slightest typing mistake causes errors to pop up in each cell. And finally, in the end, nobody understands anything to what's going on. So I'm caricaturing here, sorry, caricaturing, sorry, here on purpose. But the bottom line is that a lot of competency models are not used because they are too complex or because they take too much time to be used. Second problem, the conclusions are difficult to get. That is to say, even if your competency model is well completed in a harmonious way with nice score everywhere, uh, if you want to get the relevant information, produce results matrix, identify trends or other things, that becomes a really hellish thing. And in the end, either it's too complex, so we don't draw any conclusion from the work done, either someone take care of analyzing all the data, but it takes several months and the conclusion and decision are totally disconnected from the reality, since reality has changed in the meantime. Third problem, the competency model are too static and lack dynamism. Even the smallest change is complex and requires a lot of work to bring everything up to date. First problem, the competency model lacks scientific and analytical robustness. In general, to each competency, you will associate behavioral indicators in order to be able to measure the competency. But in general, these indicators are completely disconnected from what it seeks to measure, leading to poor analytical robustness. And last problem, one of the most important, uh, the assessments that are made are based too often on the gut feeling of the assessor. So everyone thinks they can assess others on certain competencies, but this is more of an illusory superiority bias than a real skill. So, for example, several studies have shown that simply changing the scoring scale, so for example, a 6-point scale or a 10-point scale, will lead to completely different ratings and much more discrimination assessment with a 10-point scale. So in any evaluation, it is therefore impossible to obtain a reliable indicator without a system that is based on real and objective data.
And so, with those lists of problems that Emmerich just mentioned, you're finding that we're left with a gap, ultimately a gap between the recruiters, so you guys, where your company is today, and the results that you are hoping to achieve. And in between all of those, you've got all of those problems that we just spoke about. The complexity of the tool is just too difficult to get your head around, to use in a practical everyday way. Difficulty of actually drawing out the results, and in some instances, unreliable evaluations. We wanted to go straight to your goal and get rid of all of these problems that occur in everyday operations, as we mentioned, that we got from our existing clients' feedback. And so we have created our new competency framework functionality to solve these potential problems and to provide you with the opportunity to integrate your competency framework that you have today into the Assess First application, making it really, really, really simple, making your lives a lot easier. This will ensure that you have a solution that speaks your language, your vocabulary, your business phrases. Everything will remain the same. You'll be speaking in exactly the same tongue. Not only will it be in the same language and terminology, and therefore, as I mentioned, will be more simple to understand, it will be scientifically sound and unbiased, with results and analysis that are literally automatic. This new functionality won't just make your life easier, but it will also be able to be scaled. So as and when your businesses change, as and when, potentially 6 months down the line, certain priorities of certain roles and areas of responsibility change, the tool can change and develop with you and will aid you in doing so, as opposed to hindering that development and that growth. As I previously mentioned, so we obviously assess the 3 elements of potential of an individual. What we then ultimately do is we can map these competencies crucial to you within your framework into your tool, really delving into those skills potentials that exist within your existing framework. How does it actually work, though, in terms of that integration onto the Assess First platform? Well, as I mentioned, it's very simple. It's a very quick integration. Emmerich can second me on that. The first step is to send us your reference, so your list of your own competencies that you have within your framework. We then translate that selection by selecting those traits that are attributed to those selections within our frame of reference. And behind the scenes, a scoring is generated, which identifies ultimately somebody's ability or match with that individual competency. So it's very much on a competency by competency breakdown. Great news is it takes an average, or more like maximum, of 7 days to actually complete. So that's the point upon which we receive your information on the framework to the integration onto the app. So it is very, very simple and takes a lot of the manual work away from you guys.
So, concretely, what the competency framework will look like on your application. So, what information, what metrics, what analysis you will have access to. Uh, on the one hand, a first level of individual analysis, which will allow you to compare each of your employees or candidates with regard to your competency model, and therefore with regard to each competency that really makes sense for you. By clicking on the Competency Framework tab in a profile, you will access the functionality. And by default, you will see a list with all your competencies. So, for example, competency like spread enthusiasm, react swiftly, develop a vision, inspect and improve, etc. So each competency being associated with a cluster or a competency family, which groups together skills that are similar. So, for example, take initiative, plan and organize, and inspect and improve are grouped here in taking action everyday cluster. So, in order to ease reading, what should be understood here is that it will be your own competencies with your own definition, your own vocabulary. Obviously, for this webinar, we used a generic and basic model, but the competencies will be fully customizable, depending on your model. So for each competency, as Becca mentioned, a score will be presented. So this is a score scored from 1 to 10, which tells you about the person's potential when it comes to this skill. Obviously, the closer the score is to 10, the greater the potential is, and the more distinctive potential the person has in a skill. So, for example, on the profile on the screen, we have a 7 on sharing enthusiasm, or on spreading enthusiasm, which means that the person has a strong potential on this skill. And also, if you wish to have more details on the potential of a person or on a particular competency, you just have to click on the competency to display all the info with, for example, the person's potential for success in that skill, also scored from 1 to 10. That is the person going to be successful without too much effort, with all the personality traits that have been taken into account to assess the success potential for the skills. So, for example, here for spread enthusiasm, we associated the personality traits focusing on the positive and expressing their emotions. And same thing just below with the potential for fulfillment based on motives. So here, for the skill spread enthusiasm, we have associated the motives working in a fun environment. And for each personality trait or motives taken into account in the model, in the competency, you will also find small colored bubble, which allow you to know on which elements the person is aligned and on which the person is not. So, for example, here come as an average score on expressing emotion. So a few adjustments may be necessary on a daily basis, but it will not affect his score too much. And the last piece of information is how the person positions compared to others. That is to say, to what extent the person has more or less potential over the competency than the rest of the population. So, for example, we can see here that on spread enthusiasm, Calm is placed in the top 30% of people with the highest scores. And it means that 70% of people will score lower than Calm. So this is therefore something that will distinguish him from the others and constitute a real added value. Sorry. And of course, when you hover the avatar, you will see a small popover with the details of the scores in order to give you the essential information that you need. Still in the individual result view, you will also have a possibility to visualize the result in the form of a map. So just like that, so a map that will cross the potential for success on the y-axis with a potential for fulfillment in the x-axis. So these crossings allow 4 areas of potential to emerge. So natural talents at the top right. So what the person knows how to do and appreciates doing, and behavior which will distinguish him or her from others. Also, the strategic levers, so skills that the person can mobilize in the short term. Areas for growth, so therefore things that motivate the person but on which they are not necessarily comfortable, and therefore where they will need to be supported. And also areas of discomfort, so where the person will have little chances of success, and also little chances of being fulfilled. So in the end, uh, a map that will allow you to see in a super simple, intuitive, and visual way the strength and areas of development of the person in order to better assess them and better support their progression. And always a tool that aims to be interactive with a display of detailed score when hovering over each element. So all of this is for result view at the individual level, but you will also have a possibility to map the competencies of your entire teams in just a few clicks. So nothing could be simpler. You just go to the competency framework area in the talent management tab, and you will find your competency model. So by default, it's empty until you select a group. So for example, if I select the IF team 2021 group, I directly see the score of each competency appear. So what must be understood here is that it's not an individual score anymore, but a score for the group. So, for example, the score of 7 on spread enthusiasm shows that this is a competency where there is strong potential in this group and at least more than in others. And to get more details, once again, you just click on the competency and you will see appear this distribution curve, which tell you about the distribution of individual scores in the group. So, for example, for the chosen group, we can easily see that 3 people score a 10 on this competency, 2 people score a 9, Emma score an 8, etc. So this will really allow you to analyze the dynamics of a group on each of your competency. And as for the individual view, you have a possibility of switching to a view in the form of a map. So a view where you will find a map for each of your competency. So let's say you have 83 competency, you will have 83 maybe. So these maps always intersect the potential for success and the potential for fulfillment to bring out natural talent, strategic lever, areas for growth and discomfort. And on each map, the members of the group are displayed. So, for example, here we can see that for Simon, Emma, Romain, and me, spreading enthusiasm is something that we could improve. So this is one of our development areas. So concretely, it will allow you to build better training plans by identifying where you have skill gap in your teams. And again, a map for each competency. So spread enthusiasm here, react swiftly here, handle stress, anticipate challenges. So of course, and I repeat, these are examples for the webinar, but all of these competencies displaying will be your competencies with your own vocabulary, the competencies of your competency model. And also by hovering over each area on the map, you can highlight certain parts to simplify the reading of the relevant information and see the details of a person's score when hovering over their avatar.
So, as you can see, it all has a fantastic candidate experience. There's lots of in-depth information there. But I guess what you really would like to know is what can you expect to see in terms of results from this new competency framework feature. So on an operational level, you will see reliable translations of your internal model, as we've mentioned before, written in your language, in your vocabulary, and developed within 7 days. Not only that, but from a deployment perspective, the data analysis is done straight away. Results are instant, as you can see. They're fantastically presented, and there's no need for you to wait weeks or months to manually analyze the data and kind of draw that data out through a spreadsheet or whatever other means you may currently be using. When considering the actual competencies themselves, that information will provide you with a breadth of knowledge on your team's individual strengths and weaknesses, meaning that you can use that information in lots of different ways, from a developmental standpoint, really understanding your individual teams. As I mentioned before, from a recruitment standpoint, there's so many ways that you can use the information that is provided off of the back of the framework. Not only that, but obviously it's backed up by science. They're models that are scientifically robust, as everything that we do here at Assess First. They're based on the most recent studies in psychometrics and within the industry. And again, back to that point of workforce planning, because of the fact that you will have created reliable benchmarks and indicators, you will see increased success in your workforce planning, and again, the general understanding of your team and who you've got today and how you could possibly use them in other areas of the business, and look to promote them in into other areas of the business. All of that is kind of summed up here. One thing that I just really wanted to point out as well is that this last point, the capacity of operational staff to take ownership of the model. And this really kind of sits with the fact that it is really, really simple to to do. And I'm, Emmerich obviously just showed you some of those screenshots there. What I certainly advise is you go back and speak with your account manager if you've got any specific questions about it. But because of its ease of use, and because of its speed, because of the fact that it's written in your own language, it means that operational staff, your colleagues, yourselves can really take ownership of the model, and again, making it a lot more simple in everyday use and everyday practice.
Perfect. So more than a tool, we really want competency framework and your competency model in the broad sense to become the foundation of your workforce planning strategy. Because in the end, competency framework will allow you an in-depth diagnosis and at the individual and collective level. So a diagnosis of all of your competencies, and thus allow you to identify competencies in tension, competencies gap in certain places, underused competencies, and many more. And from this quick and reliable diagnosis, you can do all the rest, such as setting up your training strategy. So by identifying the key people to be trained, and I want to say beyond just identifying the people to train, it's identifying the people for whom the training will be useful, the people who will be hyper receptive, also what exactly to train them on, and also how to train them. And also, for example, identify the most urgent training with regard to the skill gaps identified, and where you have to place your money. Also, define optimized mobility path by orienting employees in positions for which they have a high potential for success and a high potential for fulfillment. So positions for which they have a competency required, and which may be in tension in your company. So also allow you to anticipate your mobility path with regard to future needs you may have in compared to the current state of your internal competencies. Also, better target those with high potential and your future leaders. So those who have a strong potential in your core competencies and who will be an integral part of the future leadership of your company. Or also better direct your recruitment actions if competencies gap are impossible to fill internally. So at the start of this webinar, we said that as it was, all these benefits were, let's say, utopia, only achievable in a perfect world. Today, with competency framework, this perfect world can become your reality. And that's all that we wanted to present you with Becca. We're going to switch to answer all of your questions. So just stop sharing my screen. Okay, so we have a question from Emily. Can we also add our skills to the competency framework? So the short answer is no, because that's not, let's say, our vision. At SSFirst, we are really focused on, let's say, soft skills and behavioral potential. So we are not looking to add any evaluation or assessment or on hard skills in our application. We also have a second question from Alina. So, dear colleagues, would it be possible to create different competency framework for different roles? And would it be still possible to download success reports? It will be possible to create different competency framework. You can create as many as you want. If you want to create a model for, let's say, 10 or 1,000 job, you can do it. However, it will not be downloadable at first because it's something really dynamic, something really interactive, and by hovering on certain part of the application, you can display more information, and it's complicated to integrate all this in a static PDF report. Another question from Marketa. How is each competency assessed? For example, is it your own type of personality-based, social style-based questionnaires? So all the competency that will be displayed will be yours. I repeat, with your own words, your own vocabulary, etc. But of course, to be able to compute a score on each competency, we're going to associate some personality traits and motives from our questionnaires. So if you want to assess people on your competency, people still have to take our free questionnaires. So shape for personality, drive for motivation, and brain for reasoning skills.
Just to add something as well, Emmerich, to Alina's question with regards to the download of success reports, that's actually, our idea is that it's really live and interactive. And because of that, a lot more information can be presented. As Emmerich mentioned, you can kind of hover over and you've got additional information like that. Right now, there's a lot of extra information to put into one report. And it's kind of our vision in terms of moving forward with regards to really wanting to be as interactive as possible on the platform.
Okay, if you have any other question, do not hesitate to list them in the question section or even in the chat.
Alternatively, we definitely suggest you head back to your account manager with any questions that you do have. I believe, Emmerich, this will be available in a format following this session. So you can...
You mean the presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah. It will be available after the presentation. Just some work from the marketing team, but it will be available.
Brilliant. If you've got any questions, having had a look at that, please feel free. Your account manager will run through everything.
Okay, no more questions. So maybe, Becca, we can close this session if it's okay for you. Thank you all.
Yep, certainly. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, wishing you a perfect day and see you soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye.